Hello? Who's called? My husband.
1 year after this 911 call, Kouri Richins sat on a television couch, proudly presenting her newly published children's book, Are You With Me? Written to help her 3 boys cope with the loss of their father, Eric, who recently died from a brain aneurysm. But behind the scenes, investigators had already uncovered a chilling discovery. Eric hadn't died from a brain aneurysm. The autopsy revealed a fatal fentanyl overdose. Now the question wasn't just how he died, but why. So we have to talk about what Eric and Kouri were actually building. For him, it was simple. Living by the values of his Mormon faith. Hardworking, taking his sons to fishing trips, a picture of a devoted father, deeply invested in his family. Perhaps, as it would later transpire, he might have been too invested for his own good. Kouri presented herself as a successful real estate investor, but in reality, this was very different. You see, the perfect Instagram lifestyle wasn't the reality. During their dream vacation in Greece 2020, while the couple appeared to be living their best life, back home in Utah, everything was collapsing. Financial records painted a far less glamorous picture. She was taking on massive loans to refund renovations that never actually happened, creating a cycle of debt. She wasn't building an empire, she was running a high-stakes shell game. By 2022, there was no business empire, just $4.5 million in debt and predatory loans. And a wife that might have started realizing that the insurance policy of her husband might be worth more than him. Probably Eric wasn't just her husband anymore, but the most valuable asset she was managing. She desperately needed a massive win to bail herself out, so she set her sights on a sprawling $2 million mansion. A luxury flip she believed would fix everything. Eric looked at the numbers and said, "Absolutely not, the deal is too risky." But Kouri didn't listen. And in January 22, she secretly took out a loan and changed his will, made herself the beneficiary again. But why again? See, a couple of years ago, Kouri and Eric went to the mentioned Greece trip. And what was meant to be a romantic vacation later became a point of growing suspicion. One evening, Kouri handed Eric a drink and he became very sick. He called his sister immediately and told her on the phone that he believes Kouri tries to poison me. This incident, a couple of years ago, paired with Eric finding out she changed his will behind his back, made him very suspicious. And even then, he didn't file for divorce. Not yet. Instead, he went to a lawyer in secret. He stripped Kouri of her power over his estate, cut her out of his will, and transferred his entire wealth into a trust, managed by his sister.
Rules for the trust. Eric was the trustee. That means he was the manager of the trust, of all the assets that were contained in the trust, and had to follow the rules that he set.
Okay, who did Eric choose as his trustee?
He chose his sister, well, but he chose a couple of successors.
He was building a legal fortress around his sons. But how could you sleep in the same bed with a wife you believed had tried to kill you, and now changes your will? The answer is simple. Since Eric was the picture of a devoted father, the only thing he had in mind were his children. And since Kouri was his second wife, he blamed himself for his first marriage that fell apart. He wanted to do anything possible to save the relationship. So the second time he got so sick was on Valentine's Day 2022, 1 month after she changed his will. Kouri made her husband a sandwich. And according to prosecutors, shortly after eating it, Eric broke out in hives, stopped breathing, and rescued himself with an EpiPen of one of his sons. Even if he couldn't believe it, he told friends and his business partner afterwards, "If anything happens to me, it was Kouri." Despite the extreme tensions, the evening of March the 3rd arrives. The two celebrate a business success at their home in Utah. Kouri has allegedly just closed the sale of a house. Around 9 p.m. they toast together, and Kouri mixed her husband's favorite drink, a Moscow Mule, in a traditional copper mug. Afterwards, she retreats to the children's room to sleep next to one of their sons, who is allegedly plagued by nightmares. At 3:21, Kouri returns back to the marital bed and places a frantic 911 call.
My son's not breathing. He's cold. I don't know. I was sleeping in with my kids. I just came in our bed, and I turned over, and he's just cold. He's just cold.
Her husband is slumped at the foot of the bed, has no pulse, and is not breathing. The 911 dispatcher gives her instructions for reanimation, but neither she nor the quickly arriving paramedics can do anything anymore. Eric Richins dies at just 39 years old. And at first, everyone suspects a medical mystery, perhaps a ruptured aneurysm. Eric was in perfect health, but the routine autopsy at the medical examiner's office produces a result that leaves the investigators stunned. Eric Richins died of a massive fentanyl overdose. The amount in his body was astronomical. Eric had 5 times the lethal dose in his blood, taken orally. For Eric's family, this was an absolute shock. Eric was a devout Mormon, a complete family man who would never have touched hard drugs. And suddenly, Eric's family recalls a dark sentence he had spoken shortly before his death. With an eerie sense of premonition, if something happens to me, it was Kouri. For a year, Kouri Richins thought she had committed the perfect crime. Kouri published a children's book titled Are You With Me? She sat on local television couches, smiling for the cameras, wiping away tears, and talking about how comforting it was to know Eric was still watching over her family.
That doesn't mean his presence isn't here with us, and he's doing these things with us, and he's, here for birthdays, and he's here for Christmas.
In hindsight, those interviews would become some of the most unsettling moments in the case. While Kouri was publicly presenting herself as a grieving widow, behind closed doors, investigators were quietly dismantling her entire life. Look at the timing. While she was promoting a book about grief, detectives were looking at her phone, and what they found on her digital footprint completely shattered her defense. In the weeks leading up to Eric's death, Kouri's search history didn't look like that of a loving wife. She was searching for things like, what is a lethal dose of fentanyl? Utah prisons for women. Can emergency medical technicians track fentanyl? Prosecutors argued that these searches suggested preparation. Prosecutors needed to prove she actually had the drug. And that's when investigators found their star witness, the housekeeper of the Richins named Carmen Lauber. When questioned by police, Lauber admitted that Kouri had approached her, asking for some of that prescription pain medication that the junkies use, specifically fentanyl.
She had reached out and asked if I could do her a favor, and I said, yeah, probably, what is it? And then she had called me and asked me if I could reach out to somebody for some pain meds for an investor that she knew. And I told her I could see what I could do.
Also, according to investigators, after the Valentine's Day incident, Kouri bought another batch of pills. And 2 weeks later, she mixed the fatal Moscow Mule. On the 8th of May 23, just over a year after Eric's death, police swarmed Kouri's home and arrested her. The legal chess match lasted nearly 3 years, but in March 26, Kouri Richins finally faced a jury in a Park City courtroom. Her defense team argued the state's case was purely circumstantial, claiming the investigation was sloppy and driven by a biased family. They even tried to paint Eric as someone who secretly struggled with substance abuse.
Kouri also told the police the day that they came to the house that she believed Eric might have had what we call a marijuana gummy. These are all gummies that the police found in Eric's things.
Prosecutors presented dozens of witnesses and thousands of pages of records to support their case. And then, in the trial, came the ultimate proof of her behavior. The jury learned one day after Eric died, Kouri officially signed the closing papers to buy the $2 million mansion anyway.
These are the closing documents on the Midway mansion, at least the closing documents for the largest funder on the Midway mansion.
That's right, yes.
Prosecutors argued that she expected to gain access to substantial assets following Eric's death. But that never happened. Eric's legal fortress held, and Kouri never saw a single dime of his money because of it. According to the verdict, she had murdered her husband for a financial gain that she ultimately never received. Prosecutors also argued that Kouri tried to influence witnesses. Guards searching her cell discovered a handwritten letter to her mother. Kouri tried to claim the letter was just a draft for a fictional novel she was writing, but the court saw right through it.
Funny about this, meet up with him in person. I worry sometimes your house and phone are bugged. Maybe drive down to SL and meet him after work without Bree. Tell Ronnie don't overanalyze it. It was a quick 2-minute conversation, LOL. Tell him I need him to do this. Bring me home and then we will get those damn bitches. Also, please text Lotto or call. Tell him do not text me anything about us doing things together ever. Like church, skiing, trips, nothing that puts us together. It doesn't look good. We're so close to the end, let's push through. Have the conversation with Ronnie before he meets with Sky. Then tell him to tell Sky at the meeting about the conversation.
After a trial of 3 weeks, it took the jury just 3 hours of deliberation to make their decision. On March 16th, 26th, the jury returned with an anonymous verdict. Kouri Richins was found guilty on all counts, including aggravated murder and the attempted murder of her husband on Valentine's Day.
Count 1, aggravated murder. We, the jury, unanimously find that the defendant, Kouri Richins, is guilty of aggravated murder. Count 2, attempted aggravated murder. We, the jury, unanimously find that the defendant, Kouri Richins, is guilty of attempted aggravated murder.
2 months later, on May 13th, 26, on what would have been Eric's 44th birthday, the final sentencing followed. The judge handed down the ultimate punishment, life in prison without the possibility of parole, stating that she was simply too dangerous to ever be free.
A person convicted of those things is simply too dangerous to ever be free. Accordingly, Ms. Richins, based on your conviction on count 1, first-degree felony aggravated murder, the court hereby sentences you to life without parole.
Kouri Richins wanted to write a story about an unexpected loss, but in the end, she wrote her own ending. Eric Richins built a legacy of love and protecting for his boys. Kouri tried to flip that legacy for cash. But the legal walls Eric quietly built to protect his children from her greed are the exact walls that ultimately ensured she would lose her kids forever. Whether Kouri Richins was driven by financial desperation, greed, or something else entirely remains one of the most disturbing questions surrounding this case. I'd love to hear your thoughts. What was the most shocking moment for you in this case? Make sure to let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed the summary of this case and you don't want to miss my next video, consider a subscribe and a like. It helps me way more than you would think. Also make sure to check out my Patreon. I've put the link at the very top of the description box. As a supporter on Patreon, you're directly helping me to fund the days of research that goes into these cases. Also, the videos are available to watch before the official YouTube release. A massive thank you to my first 2 supporters, Vampus and Josh. See you in the next one.